And this one is a little bit tighter. It's $47 million over 5 years, only $32 million in 2012. And because it jumps up in 2013, it's actually zero in 2013. And then it's roughly another $14 million thereafter. That's the one, especially since in the last few years our budget has not grown. In fact, it's shrunk as we've had to tighten things up. And that has really tightened this graphic up. You can see in 2010, we're pretty close to the 12% level.
But Mrs. Hatcher provided me these same numbers for surrounding counties, and we were, last year we were in much better shape than Hanover, Spotsylvania, Orange, and those kind of. But again,
you're right. On the next page, we've got that graphic.
Utilities.
Yeah, on the next page, we've got that graphic. We've you can see debt to assessed value. These are as of the 2010 CAFRs, a point in time on June 30th. And you can see you're right at the average of your neighbors. Stafford, Spotsylvania, and Orange, and King George are above you. On debt service to expenditures, you are up there with King George, Orange, and Stafford, well above the average.
But again, still all the projects that we think we have to do aren't in here.
Right. So I just want to make sure that we keep an eye on those as we think about the other projects. And I think that the message has been all along, as we've talked about this, it really comes back to affordability and paying for them. At this point, the projects you're considering today, the spring projects, you're in fine shape with those ratios. Again, it goes back to affordability. Do you want, Mr. Chairman, to take a moment before we get to utilities and go talk about, and we started talking about the radio system? Do you want to go there?
No, I think let's move to utilities
okay, move
right
through
now
utilities.
so we can
okay.
stay and get the same picture.
All right. Page 14, just a quick typo. That's supposed to be 2 million even, not 2.2. Apologize. The numbers below that are correct. They were based on 2 million, and that's the $1.8 million and the 200,000 that have been identified. What we did is we looked at rural development, looked at VRA, and all-in cost of borrowing for rural development at 3.6. That takes into account the cost of issuance, which is basically the same either way. So it doesn't matter which way you go. It's the same cost of issuance we've assumed. And the VRA is a little bit higher at the 522 since they don't have the subsidized rate. We assumed both over 30 years. You can go longer with rural development. It's your choice. But we based them on 30 years for the moment. Now again, some of the considerations on page 15 is that rural development does require an O&M reserve equal to 25% of annual O&M, and for us that's approximately $566,000 based on the current budget. That has to be cash funded outside of any loans. They do give you 5 years to come up with those funds, so they do have a reserve requirement. The other thing that they do require is that any assets that have a 15-year life or shorter, that you don't go out and borrow for it. You have to pay cash. So the next time you're replacing a truck or maybe a pump, if it has a 15-year or shorter average life, has to also be cash funded. And that's currently not built into our O&M budget as it stands to be funding a lot of capital pay-go. But that's something we'd have to incorporate into our budget moving forward. VRA, as you all know, has a local reserve. It currently is basically equal to maximum annual debt service for any new issues that we add to the outstanding issues that we have. Based on the $2 million, that would be $132,000 additional that we'd need to come up with. Unless we can show that for a consecutive 3 years, we're self-supporting.
Say that again?
That unless we can show that we are self-supporting for 3 consecutive years, whether it be O&M plus debt service with whether we count user fees and availability fees or not. So we can count availability fees. We just got to show it for consecutive 3 years. So hopefully things turn, growth picks back up, and we can get there quickly. We'll get that reserve money back. The money, not just this money, but the money we've already put up. One thing to keep in mind, and it's one of the reasons that we didn't use rural development in the fall, is they can't fund PPE projects. Washington will not allow them to do a PPEA project. They believe, Washington, this is rural development telling me, they believe, Washington believes that the procurement doesn't meet federal procurement standards, and so they will not do any PPE projects in Virginia. So it's something to keep in mind. One other thing I want to add that we didn't have enough information to put it in the book, but we've been talking with the health department about a possible loan. You might recall when we talked about the Caroline Pines project that we looked to the health department to see if we could get any funds through them because it was a failing system. At that time, we had missed their deadline. They didn't have any money available. We've been talking to them about seeing if we could retroactively go back and try to get some money for that project, and it appears that we might be able to do that. It's not a guarantee. Their application deadline is April 1st, and if we'd like your nod, they would like for us to get a nod to put an application in, if that is something the board so desires. We're talking about 2 to 3% money if we can get it. Our thought is, since we've already borrowed for Caroline Pines, is that we go to VRA. If we get awarded the money from the Department of Health, we go to VRA and say, the money we borrowed for Caroline Pines, we'd like to move over to the wells and the permit and not borrow any more money. So essentially, we're moving some money from one project to another. We think that VRA, we have not talked to VRA, but we think VRA would be amenable to that. And so we would have an issue. We've got basically $1 million differential, roughly about $700,000 differential, I think, there, that we'd have to work out. We'll see if we can get that returned back to them. But that's something that we'd like to explore further, but we need, since April 1st is coming up, to get going on the application with Department of Health. Joey, is there anything I'm missing there on the Department of Health discussion we had? Right. We can still move forward with the interim funding in case we don't get that money. Because
Could you repeat what Mr. Schiebel said?
He said we still can move. That's what I was.
Okay.
We can still move forward with with some interim funding because Mr. Schiebel needs to get his project moving with the well drilling. Mm-hmm. So we can do some interim funding and make sure that, as we say at the outset, one of the goals was to make sure you had funds available to get the projects done when you need to. So. But we hope we can get that application in. We think we're going to qualify pretty well. We don't know that we can get all the money because there's some fine-tuning things such as they don't cover fire. If we upsize the lines for fire support, that's not something they'll fund, so we have to back those numbers out. So there's a little bit of tweaking there that we'll need to do. So our thought is to at this point, looking at page 16, we can move forward with an interim financing for rural development if we need to. If the Department of Health falls through, we do the interim funding. Rural development is there as a backup. If that falls through, then we can go to our third option in the fall with VRA. If you want to move forward with a permanent financing, or we keep it as an interim and take it out in the future, just as we're doing with the general government schools. That's an option that you have. I think the bottom line is, Mr. Chairman, is it really gives you an option, this interim financing that we're suggesting, gives the board a chance to take into account all the projects that you've got, not just the spring projects, but some of the fall projects. You've got a budget you're obviously still deliberating over. Numbers are still changing, and we've got deadlines coming up. If we want to do, I think our next steps, essentially, if you want to move forward with permanent financing and begin paying back principal immediately and not go the lit loan route, we need to know so we can tell the school board to put a VPSA application in. If we're going to go the interim route and the lit loan route, then they can wait, and we can always come back to them later if we need to go to VPSA. And eventually we'll need their, I'm pretty sure the lit loan application is going to require an okay from both parties. On the general government projects, same thing. Gives you a chance to figure out which way you want to go, which projects you want to do, but you're not under the gun with a VRA deadline because their deadlines are approaching as well.
Yeah.
One of the things, though, I think that we want to suggest is just to keep the ball moving, especially knowing that we've got these utility projects we need to keep moving on, is go ahead and have the public hearing. We may need it at some point anyway, and go ahead and set that up for April 12th. That way we kind of keep our options open.
I'm going to ask Mr. Ashcraft to do that, so we'll at least have the public hearing. And in all cases, if we were to borrow X amount of dollars through one vehicle or another, we always have the opportunity to say thanks, but no thanks.
That's right.
We've got another better offer.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. And again, this is just a presentation of a plan. We're not approving any financing tonight.
Right.
It's just a matter of which way do you want to go. And I think, obviously, we've got some deadlines coming up, and so really we're just looking for a nod from you all which way to go, long-term or interim.
Yeah. Well, to me, and I guess we'll discuss that briefly now to kind of see which way the board is nodding.
Okay.
But it looks like under the original proposal on page 8, I thought it was. Yeah, which is what we're doing right now, or what our budget is based on right now is what's on page 8.
That's correct.
Now, we have the option of looking at page 10 as an alternative.
Yes, sir.
And what would happen, and I'm going to try to repeat this to make sure I understand and you correct me if I'm wrong or when I'm wrong, but in our budget now, we have a 6 cents. 6 cents of our tax rate is dedicated specifically for debt service right now.
And I'm looking at Fran, it's 6 of the 11, right?
Actually, it's 6 plus 3. So it's really, but we're just talking about this 6 cents. The 3 cents, the other 3 cents we're talking about in the budget was 3 cents to create a debt service payment fund or whatever to help us in next year when we have to have a specific amount of cash reserve.
That's been reduced to about 2.5 cents.
The 3 cents has been reduced to 2.5 cents. Okay, 2.5, 3, and this is I'm just trying to use the original numbers, and I know you've been working on them all week, which is great. But we have the option of saying 6 cents of the tax rate now, and then you're saying 3.8 cents next year of whatever the tax rate would be, and it will be the board's decision to say we will cut spending by whatever 6 cents times 266,000, 1.3 million and change. We'll cut spending by 1.3 million and change, or on the far end of the scale, there's a increase in the tax rate to cover that particular amount of money. Or if we go with what you have on page 10, that same 6 cents that we have in the budget now, we could reduce to 2.3 cents this year. But having said that, we would have to increase it 4.7 cents next year.
That's correct.
But if we did it that way, the total impact would be 7.1 cents versus 9.9 cents.
That's correct.
So we basically save
2.8.
I was going to use 3 because the math was a little easier.
3%.
But we save $780,000, 3 cents versus, or 3 cents times the 266. And these numbers that we're using now, the per penny number of 266 and what the tax rate, well, just the 266 number, that's going to stay the same for at least 4 years until we do another reassessment, right? So that's a given when somebody comes to the board and says, I need $266,000 for whatever, we know that everybody in the county is going to pay an extra penny on the tax rate for that, and that's kind of what I'm trying to make sure we understand. And please, if
266 will fluctuate based on each year's assessment. It won't fluctuate
Right.
So it can go up or down based on new construction,
It'll-
this
yeah,
kind
it-
of thing, but it's
right.
not gonna be,
It could go up based on new construction.
But it could go up based on new construction, but it's realistically ballpark. I mean, it
Yes.
goes up maybe 5–10%. It never goes up or down 20 or 30% like the assessment did.
Correct, that is correct.
So I mean, I just want a ballpark for us to plan, you know, because we really can't go to next year and say, oh, next year it's going to be X.
That's right.
But as long as we plan with consistent numbers that we have now, we'll have a pretty good picture of where we're going to be.
That's probably correct, give or take $10,000.
Okay,
And I'm basing that on the 09 number, 10 number, didn't change a whole lot.
okay. And that's really the only thing I'm trying to say. I mean, it's not going to be exactly 266, but it'll be in that ballpark. Okay. Anything else you want to add? Oh, you want to add you want to nod
I think
one way
the
or
only
other?
thing I want to add there is Bowling Green, if we borrow the $3 million that wasn't included in the 6 qualified school monies,
Right.
if we do that, whatever the interest on that would be added to that, get my number here, that 2.3 cents.
So we haven't counted anything for Bowling Green primary at all?
Right.
Not the 6 or the
Not on
the
page
additional
10.
3?
On page 10, there's nothing about Bowling Green.
No.
Right. The qualified school monies,
Right.
we're pretty sure that the state will allow us to defer that to another budget year.
And
Okay? They've done it in the last 2 times, no reason to think they wouldn't let us do it again.
But
They've
we
let
still have
others-
to
they've let
account
others.
for the 3 million that we need in addition to the 6, correct?
Right, and if we do the interim financing, which is basically what the page 10 plan is, the only thing that's not in that 2.3 cents is any interest associated with that $3 million.
Right, but your original point was there's nothing in the budget for the 6 million this year, and there's nothing in the budget for the 3 million this year. So we have
That's right.
we have nothing in the budget to reflect what's going to happen with Bowling Green Primary at all.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Let's back up a little bit.
Yes, no.
Let's back up a little bit. The original proposal for the CIP
the
included $9
project
million.
is, the project is in the CIP.
Correct.
There is no debt service budgeted for
Right.
that project.
Okay, just wanna-
Because we have planned it for
Right.
spring of
Everybody
12.
understood?
I know
Yeah.
it's in the budget, but I know that we're not counting for debt service that goes with
That's
it.
correct.
I'm just, yeah, my whole point is we're just talking about debt service because we've got a lot of things in the CIP that we may or may not do.
Exactly.
But that's one of the things we're trying to say we want to do, so somewhere I have to account for that. And how is that going to affect my option on page 10?
And if you look on page 20, we've projected that, if you'll see the combined Bowling Green, that's basically your interest, 77,921.
Right.
We basically assumed that we'd start paying principal back 2 years after borrowing it. So we did a 2-year, no principal on the qualified school bonds, and then started repayment.
Now, can I ask one more question, Mr. Rogers?
Sure.
Your other clients, you know, we all like low payments right away, but it kind of reminds me of the housing business where we have a low mortgage and then 5 years later the mortgage balloons and we can't afford whatever the payment is. Do your other clients defer with interest-only loans for the first couple of years, anticipating revenue growth?
We've done that, especially what we're doing here, which is waiting until some of the debt service drops down to where it's more manageable from a debt service standpoint. We have, yes. In fact, with the qualified school, we've actually had a number of clients defer for a couple of years because of the economy, the principal repayment on these qualified school bonds. I think the most we've seen was 2 years.
Okay.
So they paid back years 3, 4, and 5.
Because, I mean, sooner or later, you've got to expect the economy is going to pick up.
Right.
But if it doesn't pick up when that spike comes, you've got double trouble.
And one thing to keep in mind is that the interim financing would have a call provision that would allow us to take it out generally within a year of the financing, so that if something happened and we decided we wanted to get out quicker, we could, without penalty.
Okay.
Generally without penalty.
Okay. quickly, ideas on the options between page 8 and 10, which is what you wanted a nod for one of those two options?
Correct.
Mr. Akers? Michael?
I'm leaning toward the page 10, interim funding strategy. It saves money in the long run, provides the funding that we need to do the projects that need to be done. So I'm leaning towards supporting that scenario.
Mr. Sealy? Mic on?
I guess it depends on the projects that we go about, but I know that we can't do a 6-cent tax increase in this coming budget year. And I'm looking at basically schools at this point in time.
Okay. Mr. Popowitz?
Page 10.
Mr. Underwood?
I concur. Page 10 allows us to continue to move forward with some interim financing, and then we can look forward to hopefully the economy changing over the next 3 or 5 years, and that should help us.
Okay, and for those that don't have it in front of them, the financing option we have that we've been discussing on page 8 has a 6 cents. 6 cents of the tax rate would be this year, and 3.8 cents would be next year. And the option we're looking at on page 10 is a 2.3 cents of the tax rate this year and 4.7 next year. It roughly saves us almost 3 cents on the tax rate. Okay, Mr. Rogers, is that kind of the nod you needed as in terms of what the board would be leaning toward?
Yes, sir, it does. I think at this point, what we're hearing is we'll go the interim route.
Right.
So we can delay the application for VPSA right now. We will move forward with our talks with the health department on the utility projects.
Right.
And I guess that means we're getting the nod to put that application in for April 1st.
That would be, right,
Okay. We'll move forward with the public hearing on the 12th of April.
exactly.
And I guess what we'll do is wait, I guess, for input from you all as to exactly what projects, because obviously we can't go borrow any money until we know what you want to do. And so we'll keep moving forward with these other items until we hear back from you.
And
Is that?
that's kind of it. We're planning to move forward to some degree.
And I guess should you want to move forward with school projects, we'll work with the schools toward getting lit loan applications together.
Exactly.
Once you've given us.
We have, I mean, of all the projects we have that you've listed here are the YMCA, Caroline High School's HVAC, renovations to Caroline High School, school buses, and replacement ambulance. Those projects, we're not, terminology is a real issue. We are fairly committed to the Bowling Green primary renovation because we've gotten money that we can use from the government. So if we only did that project, all of the plans that we've discussed would still be in play.
Correct.
Now, the next issue is, and I think that's it for you, is Mr. Parton or Mr. Ashcraft, do you want to talk about specific projects here, or does anybody want to discuss any of the specific projects at this time?
Mr. Chairman,
Here?
Chief Lehman, I'm sorry.
6:30.
I just want to say Chief Lehman has some updated information on the ambulance that I think the board needs to hear. There could be a deadline approaching on that. Other than that, the rest of the projects are really as they stand as committed, or as proposed, I'm sorry. But the chief has some additional information on that ambulance that may have a deadline. If you would oblige him a couple minutes, I think it's important information.
Thank you, Mr. Ashcraft. Chief?
Good evening. We, as you currently know, we have an ambulance that's on order that we purchased under a 50% grant from the Rescue Squad Assistance Grant. This fiscal year, or this spring barn, we've asked for another replacement ambulance because of the age and the mileage on our existing fleet. At this point in time, this one unit is being constructed. If the board would consider allowing me to issue a purchase order prior to July 1st, we could get the unit at a $5,000 savings, approximately $5,000. It might be a little more. Looking at a manufacturer's cost increase in July of about 4 to 5%. It's not exact, but they're anticipating that. So if it goes over that, we could have that additional cost. Right now, our units are costing $142,500. This unit, if the board would consider, would cost us $143,000, and the difference is we're going from a 2010 to a 2011 chassis. There are no more 2010 chassis available. So we checked that option as well. But I just wanted to make you aware of that, that we do have that cost savings option.
All right. Bottom line is, we are discussing, and we just discussed, having that particular debt service in next year's budget,
Yes,
right?
sir.
So if the board were to give you permission to write a purchase order June 30th, I still don't have to pay anything until next year's budget, July 1.
That is correct. The other side of that equation is if I can do it within 30 days, both units can be built together. So it would save time and effort. We could do one inspection trip, get both units at the same time during inspection and so forth. You still are not paying until after July. The ambulances will not be delivered till after that time period. So we're still in next year's fiscal year.
And I haven't theoretically approved the
Pay format delivery, yes, sir.
I haven't theoretically approved the one ambulance that's in the spring borrowing yet, but anybody have a problem with that?
No, sir. I don't have a problem with it. I think if we can save $5,000, we save $5,000.
And especially since I don't have to pay anything until when I planned on paying it. Is that right? Keely? Everybody? Okay, it sounds like you're okay. All right, you want to move forward 30 days from now or 30 days together?
30 days from now, I'll do it tomorrow basically and have that in place if it's okay. And get it in, and to get it in the queue.
Okay. I don't think there's a problem with that. So you can go ahead. Chief, you go right ahead and do that. We're gonna pass on the projects right now for further discussion, because I don't know about anybody else, but I think we're gonna take a quick dinner break. Is that all right with you? Yes. Okay. So we're gonna adjourn. Colonel, I apologize. I know you were supposed to come at 6 o'clock, and we changed the time to 6:30. So we're gonna take a quick 15-minute supervisor time break. So we're going to try to get back in 15 minutes, but we will reconvene our official meeting at 6:35, 6:40. Thank you, sir.